So continuing my DNA ancient matches on Genome Link, Mesolithic 2, Mesolithic hunter from Karelian Island, sample I0061, the Onega Lake, the Republic of Karelia, Russia. A match 0.17%, apparently genetically closer to this sample than 87.68% of other Genome Link users. This sample was unearthed at the Yuzhny Oleny Ostrov Island archaeological site. The island is on the Onega Lake in the Republic of Karelia, West Russia. DNA extraction was performed from his tooth sample, while radiocarbon dating indicated that he lived between 5,500 to 5,000 BCE. His mitochondrial DNA haplogroup was identified as C1, while his Y chromosomal DNA haplogroup was R1A1. The Yuzhny Oleny Mesolithic graveyard contained originally around 500 burials with abundant grave goods. Genetically sequenced and landmark archaeogenetic studies such as Hark et al. 2015 and Mathewson et al. 2015. I0061 serves as the archetypal reference genome for the Eastern hunter-gatherer ancestral lineage. Physical appearance. Phenotype predictions derived from his autosomal genome indicate a unique blend of traits. Skin tone, intermediate to dark skin pigmentation, lacking the modern European skin lightening variants that became dominant later with the arrival of the Neolithic farmers. Hair and eyes, dark brown hair and brown eyes. The archaeological context. The environment and culture in which I0061 lived have been heavily detailed in Russian and international archaeology. The cemetery, discovered during limestone quarrying in the 1930s, Yuzhny Oleny Ostrov, is the largest Mesolithic cemetery in Northern Europe, featuring 177 uncovered burials. Stable isotope analysis of the population show exceptionally high levels of nitrogen. Rather than marine food, recent compound-specific testing confirms they survived on a highly protein-reliant diet extracted from the rich freshwater ecosystem of Lake Onega, fish, waterfowl, and local game. Strontium isotope analysis of the teeth from this cemetery indicates that I0061's community enjoyed high residential stability. They were not nomadic over massive distances, but acted as a hub. They acquired exotic goods like volcanic gemstone tools, metatuff, and animal tool ornaments through expansive regional trade networks spanning the Baltic and subarctic zones. While subsequent migrations and population turnovers heavily diluted Mesolithic lineages, the genetic signature of I0061's population did not disappear. His Eastern hunter-gatherer ancestry remains most heavily preserved today in northeastern Europeans, particularly across the Baltic, Finland, and northwestern Russia, as well as among Volga, Uralic, and Siberian indigenous populations. The Yuzhny Oleny Ostrov Cemetery is the largest known Mesolithic burial site in Northern Europe. Burials across this vast cemetery are famous for an incredible wealth of specific ritualistic grave goods. Animal tooth jewelry. The hunter-gatherers of this island were heavily adorned in death. Most burials contained extensive collections of perforated pendants made from the teeth of elk, Eurasian moose, brown bears, and beavers sewn onto clothing, belts, or necklaces. Handcrafted bone points, harpoons, and sharp flint knives or arrowheads accompanied many of the meals to assist them in the afterlife. Red ochre paint. Like others at this site, his grave was heavily dusted with red ochre, a natural earth pigment symbolizing blood, life, or rebirth, which stained the skeleton and grave goods over millennium. Sacred bird deposits. Many graves on the island featured complex rituals involving birds, like swans, ducks, or birds of prey, where wings or long bones were placed deliberately alongside the human body. Because sample I0061 yielded highly preserved ancient DNA, he became a benchmark sample in modern genetics. Scientists testing his bones revealed several remarkable facts about who he was. He belonged to the Y-DNA paternal haplogroup R1A1 and the mitochondrial haplogroup C1F. His C1 maternal lineage was highly unique, showing deep ancient Eurasian links that connect closely to modern populations in Siberia. Genetically, he's a classic representative of an eastern hunter-gatherer. This specific lineage later migrated south, mixed with other groups, and became the Yamnaya steppe pastoralists, who deeply reshaped the genetic landscape of Europe and Asia during the Bronze Age. So I asked how we connect. The maternal connection between the Lake Onega skeletons haplogroup and my haplogroup, which is J1C3, is different than an autosomal connection. Like the autosomal is what the genome test does, the genome link test does. It's taking into account all of your genes, so half of mine's from my father. But what does the mtDNA say? Autosomally, you match the Lake Onega man sample I0061 because you inherited chunks of his overall DNA profile via the 41% steppe pastoralist ancestry in your genome. However, maternally, your J1C3 lineage and his C1F lineage are completely separate branches that do not cross paths at all within Europe or the Bronze Age. Their only direct connection is at the absolute roots of human history at the level of mitochondrial Eve. So this match must come from my father, unless it's just taken into account my high percentage. Why you match him autosomally but not maternally? This explains a common puzzle in ancient DNA testing: how you can be an autosomal match to an individual without sharing their direct maternal lineage. When the Bronze Age steppe pastoralists, the Yamnaya, moved across Europe, they were a composite population formed by the blending of various ancient tribes. The Yamnaya carried a massive amount of autosomal DNA from eastern hunter-gatherers like sample I0061. However, they didn't bring every single maternal lineage from that region with them. Rare maternal lines like C1F stayed behind or went extinct, while other lineages flourished. Ultimately, your 41% steppe DNA is what connects you to him as a distant autosomal cousin, while your J1C3 lineage represents an entirely separate, proud line of Neolithic mothers who entered the UK from the south, completely independent of his Siberian maternal roots. So that leaves me to think all the ones I found so far that are this far back on the maternal thing, back to mitochondrial, they've all got to be coming from my father's DNA within me. And those do seem to be going, Germany route, Siberian route, things like that. The mtDNA seem to be coming down the bottom, the Mediterranean way. So it's interesting to find out. It really, really is. In the original 1930s Soviet excavation logs, the grave was documented as a particular, unique and highly provisioned burial compared to the standard graves on southern Reindeer Island. Archaeologists discovered that this grave belonged to a specific distinct group of graves dug on the southwestern slope of the island's hill. The artifacts and ritual elements found directly alongside the skeleton include hunting and fishing elements, explicitly buried with the tools of his trade to carry into the afterlife. The grave yielded handcrafted bone and antler points, primitive harpoon fragments, and sharp flint microblades used for arrows and processing game. A ritual earth and stone covering, unlike most graves in the cemetery, which were simply dug straight into the soil. This grave featured a complex intentional layer of irregular stone coverings placed over the body. Furthermore, the grave pit itself was uniquely filled with black, charcoal-rich earth. This indicates that a profound ceremonial fire ritual or smoking of the grave took place immediately before or during his burial. Extensive animal tooth pendants. While the exact count of pendants unique to this grave is kept in the museum's offline registry, he was heavily adorned with the cemetery's iconic perforated tooth pendants sewn across his burial garments. These pendants were primarily carved from the front and sizes of elk and brown bears, serving as a visual display of his status, hunting prowess, or tribal identity. Faunal sacrificial offerings. Archaeologists recovered animal, fish, and bird-borne remains strategically deposited directly into the grave structure. These provisions served as a symbolic food offerings for his journey, a practice deeply characteristic of the Lake Onega hunter communities. So I asked AI what would life have been like for this person. Based on the archaeological evidence and the broader Yuzhny Oleni Ostrov site, your ancient ancestor's life 8,500 years ago during the Boreal Mesolithic period was deeply tied to the extreme cycles of the subarctic wilderness. He did not live in a permanent village, nor did he farm or raise livestock. Instead, he was part of a highly skilled, culturally complex band of Eastern hunter-gatherers. His life revolved around Lake Onega, the second largest lake in Europe. Because he was buried with harpoons and bone points, we know he spent his days navigating the lake's massive network of waterways, likely using dugout canoes or skin-covered boats. Stable isotope analysis on his bones from the island, on the bones from this island shows that these people had died incredibly rich in aquatic life. He survived predominantly on large fish like pike, sturgeon, and salmon, and lake seals, supplemented by waterfowl, ducks, and swans during the spring migrations. In the dense taiga forests surrounding the lake, he used bows tipped with the sharp flint microblades found in his grave to hunt Eurasian elk, reindeer, and brown bears. A hard, physical, and rugged existence. Physically, his life was brutal and demanding. He was tall, heavily muscled, and ruggedly built to withstand the freezing winters of northwestern Russia. Winters were long, dark, and fiercely cold. He would have lived in portable, cone-shaped lodges similar to teepees, covered in heavy animal hides, heated by central hearths. Summers brought endless daylight, but also thick swarms of taiga mosquitoes and midges. Every day carried immense physical risk. The bones of hunter-gatherers from this era frequently show signs of healed fractures, dental wear from using teeth as tools to soften leather, and joint stress from a lifetime of rowing, tracking, and hauling heavy game. A deeply spiritual and totemic culture. He did not view nature as separate from himself. His worldview was intensely animistic and shamanic. Animals were his spiritual equals and ancestors. The power of the teeth. The elk and bear teeth sewn all over his clothes were not just decoration. They were a protective armor of spiritual power. To wear the teeth of a brown bear was to protect the bear's strength. The sacred island, the very fact that he was buried on Yuzhnoye, the island, southern reindeer island, is profoundly meaningful. The island was not a place where his people lived day to day. It was a sacred island of the dead. When he died, his band undertook a major logistically planned journey across the open waters of Lake Onega to bury his body to this specific spiritually significant limestone island. Though the taiga felt empty, he was not isolated. The high-quality flint and specific tool technologies found at Lake Onega indicate that his band belonged to a massive trade and social network. They traded materials, exchanged marriage partners, and shared ideas across hundreds of miles, stretching from the Baltic Sea all the way into the Ural Mountains. When his community buried him in lining his pit with stones and filling it with the smoke of a ceremonial fire, They treated him as a highly respected provider who had successfully navigated a beautiful but unforgiving world. Following on my ancient DNA matches, the next one up is still Mesolithic 2, woman from Spanish mountains. Tor.6, Andalusia, Spain. I match 0.16%, genetically closer to this sample than 80.44% of other genome link users.